Rain in Ashgrove never fell gently. It came down like the sky had a grudge. On the night of October the 9th, a single light burned in apartment 4B of the old Caldwell building, a narrow brick tower wedged between a shuttered bakery and a pawn shop that hadn't changed its window display in a decade. Inside that room sat a woman named Elaine Caro, 53 years old, a piano teacher, a widow, and, until that night, a woman with no enemies that anyone could name. By morning, she was gone. Not dead, not found. Gone. The door to her apartment was locked from the inside, bolted with a chain that still hung undisturbed. The windows hadn't been opened in years. The paint along the frames had fused them shut. There was a half-finished cup of tea on the table, still faintly warm when the caretaker found it at 6 a.m., and there was no Elaine Caro anywhere in that room. This is the case that would follow Detective Mara Voss for the rest of her career. Not because it was the most violent, not because it was the most complicated, but because, for the first time in 18 years on the force, she would stand in the middle of a sealed room and not be able to explain how someone had vanished from it. This is a fictional crime mystery story. Stay with us till the end. The truth is more human and more devastating than anything supernatural. Detective Mara Voss had a rule she lived by. Impossible was a word lazy people used. There was always an explanation, always a thread, however thin, that connected cause to effect. She built an entire career on pulling that thread until the truth fell out. She arrived at the Caldwell building just after 7 a.m., coffee untouched in her hand, the kind of gray morning that made the whole city look like it was holding its breath. The caretaker, a stooped, anxious man named Walter Higgs, met her at the door. He'd worked in the building for 11 years and had the particular exhaustion of a man who'd just seen something he couldn't unsee. "I heard a sound around midnight," he told her, his hands shaking slightly as he fumbled with his keyring, like a chair scraping the floor. "Just once. I figured she dropped something. I didn't think anything of it until this morning, when she didn't answer for her 7 a.m. piano student." Voss stepped into apartment 4B and felt the air shift, that specific stillness a room takes on when something has gone deeply wrong inside it. The deadbolt was engaged. The chain lock, the old-fashioned kind that has to be slid into its track from inside, was still latched. Every window was painted shut, undisturbed for what looked like years based on the thickness of dust along the sills. There was no other door, no fire escape access, no vents large enough for a person to pass through. On the small kitchen table sat a teacup, half full, with a faint curl of steam still rising when the caretaker first found it. A second chair was pulled slightly away from the table, not pushed in, not knocked over, just slightly askew, as if someone had stood up in the middle of a conversation. Voss crouched beside it, studying the way the light caught the porcelain. "Tell me about her," she said. "Family, visitors, anyone who had a key." "No family that I know of," Higgs said. "Husband passed 4 years back. Heart attack, real sudden. She kept to herself mostly. Taught piano lessons 3 days a week. Quiet. Never any trouble." Voss nodded slowly, scanning the room. A locked door, sealed windows, no other way in or out. And yet, that second teacup, that askew chair. Someone else had been in this room, and whoever it was had left no trace of how they'd entered or how Elaine Caro had left with them. She allowed herself exactly one private thought before pushing it away. This doesn't make sense. And then she did what she always did. She started pulling the thread. Back at the precinct, Voss spread photographs of the scene across her desk like a hand of cards she didn't yet know how to play. Her partner, Detective Theo Lansky, leaned over her shoulder, chewing the end of a pen he'd quit smoking to replace. "Sealed room, no exit, no body," he said. "You know what this looks like." "Don't say it." "I'm just saying the internet's gonna have a field day." Local woman vanishes into thin air. She didn't vanish into thin air, Theo. People don't do that. Someone helped her leave, or someone took her, and they did it in a way that's supposed to look impossible. That's not magic. That's planning. Lansky held up his hands in surrender, but Voss could already feel the shape of the case settling over her like weather. There was something deliberate about the scene. Too clean to be panic. Too strange to be coincidence. She started where she always started. Not with the obvious, but with what didn't belong. The second teacup was the first thread. Lab analysis came back 2 days later. A faint trace of lipstick on the rim, a shade Elaine Carroll didn't own. None of her cosmetics in the bathroom matched it. Someone else had been drinking tea across the table from her, calmly in the hours before she disappeared. The second thread was the caretaker's timeline. Voss pulled the building's old logbook, the kind that listed maintenance visits, deliveries, anyone buzzed in after hours. Higgs had said he heard the sound around midnight, but the logbook showed a service elevator had been used at 11:42 p.m., nearly 20 minutes before the sound he described. Used by whom? The log didn't say. The card swipe system had been broken for a week, meaning to fix it. Higgs admitted when she pressed him, looking everywhere but her eyes. The third thread came from Elaine Carrow's piano students. Voss spent an afternoon interviewing each of them, a parade of children and a few adult hobbyists, none of whom had anything but kind words for their teacher. But one name kept surfacing in the margins of their stories, almost accidentally. A man named Desmond Ware, who used to wait outside during lessons, sometimes for an hour, just sitting on the building's front steps. "He used to walk her home sometimes," said one student's mother. "I always thought it was sweet. An old friend, maybe." Elaine never said much about him. Voss wrote the name down and underlined it twice. Desmond Ware lived 11 blocks from the Caldwell building, in a small apartment that smelled of old books and turpentine. He was 60 years old, soft-spoken, with paint-stained hands and a kind of stillness that made Voss instantly suspicious. The stillness of a man rehearsing his story before anyone asked for it. "Elaine and I were friends," he said, when she pressed him about the visits. "Old friends. We knew each other before her husband. Actually, before everything. You used to wait outside during her lessons. I liked the building, the quiet. It reminded me of somewhere I used to live." He paused. "I didn't take her, detective, if that's what you're working toward. I would never hurt Elaine." Voss studied him the way she studied every uncertain witness, not for the lie itself, but for the shape of it. People rarely lied about everything. They lied about one specific thing and built elaborate scaffolding of truth around it to keep it standing. "Where were you on the night she disappeared?" "Home, alone. I don't have anyone to confirm that, which I imagine makes me look guilty." "It makes you look careful," Voss said. "Those aren't always the same thing." She left his apartment unconvinced of his innocence, but equally unconvinced of his guilt. Something about Desmond, Ware felt less like a man hiding a crime and more like a man hiding grief, the kind that curls in on itself and refuses to be looked at directly. That night, back at her desk, Voss laid out the timeline again. The elevator log at 11:42. The sound at midnight. The 2 teacups. Desmond's old, careful friendship with a woman who'd never mentioned him to anyone else in her life. And one detail she kept circling back to, the one that didn't fit any obvious explanation. The faint smell of rain inside a room with windows sealed shut for years. It had rained that night, but how does the smell of rain get into a room that hasn't let in outside air in over a decade? She closed her eyes and pictured the apartment again, slower this time. The teacups, the askew chair, the chain lock untouched. And then it struck her, not an answer, but a question she hadn't asked yet. What if no one had broken into that room at all? What if the second person had never needed to break in, because they already had a way to be there, hiding in plain sight of the case from the very beginning? The next morning, Voss returned to the Caldwell building with a locksmith and a stubborn hunch. She had read, buried in the building's decades-old maintenance file, a single line that everyone, Higgs included, had apparently forgotten. Apartment 4B, dual-entry conversion circa 1974. Secondary access via adjoining service closet, sealed per tenant request, 1991. A second door, bricked over, painted to match the wall, hidden behind a built-in linen cabinet that had clearly not been moved in years. Except, when Voss pulled it gently from the wall, it slid with disturbing ease. The screws backed halfway out. The wallpaper behind it scored faintly with fresh scratch marks. There it was. The room hadn't been sealed at all. It had a second way in, one that had been deliberately hidden, and deliberately remembered by exactly one person who'd had reason to know about it. Who would know this door existed? Voss asked Higgs, who stood pale in the doorway. The building's been through 3 owners since '91, he stammered. Records like that don't usually. Who, Walter? He didn't answer right away. And in the silence, Voss understood that the question had never really been about the lock at all. It had been about who held the key to a secret that the rest of the building had forgotten existed. It took 3 more days, 2 more interviews, and one very uncomfortable conversation with Walter Higgs's estranged daughter before the full picture assembled itself. Walter Higgs hadn't acted alone, and he hadn't acted out of malice. Years earlier, before he'd taken the caretaker job, Higgs had briefly rented apartment 4B himself, back when the hidden service door was common knowledge among long-term tenants. A quiet workaround for moving furniture without using the building's narrow main stairwell. When he'd moved out and Elaine Carroll moved in, the door was simply forgotten, sealed behind a cabinet that nobody thought to question. Elaine had discovered it herself, years later, quite by accident, and instead of reporting it, she'd used it, quietly, privately, for a reason that had nothing to do with crime, and everything to do with a life she'd been hiding from everyone, including her own piano students. Elaine Carroll was not missing. She had left. Desmond Ware hadn't lied about their friendship. He'd simply protected the truth of it. Elaine had been planning for nearly a year to leave behind a marriage's worth of grief, a town that only knew her as the quiet widow, and a life that had quietly suffocated her since her husband's death. Desmond was her oldest friend, the one person who knew, and the second teacup on the table that night belonged to him, there to help her carry the last of her boxes through the hidden door, down the old service stairwell, and into a car weighing 2 blocks away, far from any window that might have seen. The vanishing had never been a crime. It had been an exit, engineered by a woman desperate enough to disappear from her own life, rather than ask anyone for permission to leave it. Walter Higgs's nervous, evasive behavior hadn't been guilt over a kidnapping. It had been guilt over keeping her secret, and fear of being blamed for helping a grieving woman start over in a way no one would understand or forgive. Voss found Elaine Carroll 9 days later in a small coastal town 4 hours from Ashgrove, living under a name that was technically hers, her maiden name unused for 30 years. She was teaching piano again in a sunlit room that smelled nothing like the apartment she'd left behind. "I didn't break any law that I know of," Elaine said quietly when Voss appeared at her door. "I'm allowed to leave my own life, aren't I?" "You are," Voss said. "But you frightened a lot of people who cared about you. And you let an old man take the blame for something that was never his to carry." Elaine's composure cracked, just slightly. "I never meant for Walter to suffer for it. I couldn't explain it to anyone without them trying to talk me out of it. Out of leaving. Out of finally choosing something for myself." Voss didn't arrest her. There was, in the end, no crime to charge. Only a woman who had engineered her own disappearance rather than face a town's gentle, suffocating pity. But she made Elaine call Desmond. Made her call Walter Higgs too, to release him from the secret he'd been carrying alone, badly, for over a week. Driving back to Ashgrove that night, Voss thought about the case, the way she thought about all the ones that stayed with her. Not the cases with the most blood, but the ones that revealed something uncomfortable about the gap between what looks impossible and what is simply hidden. There had been no locked room miracle, no vanishing act, just a door someone had forgotten, a grief no one had asked about, and a woman who'd needed an exit badly enough to build one in secret rather than ask for it out loud. Some mysteries aren't impossible. They're just unfinished, until someone is patient enough to keep pulling the thread, even when every door in the room appears to be locked. This has been a fictional crime mystery story, created for entertainment purposes only. All characters and events are products of imagination. If you enjoyed this detective thriller, subscribe for new mystery stories and psychological suspense thrillers every week.